All right, you either blessed or miserable accursed, depending on your predilection at this point in time. For the campaign, we're back. Your Curse of Politics panel. Jordan Leichnitz, Scott Reid, Kory Teneycke, myself. We're here to break down day 2 of the second week of the election campaign for you. Scott, you look well rested. Are you well rested?
I I am, and this is the God's honest truth. I had a dream last night.
Oh,
Uh,
Christ.
I, I woke up and went back to sleep around 3:30, and that's usually when I have like vivid dreams I remember. And I had a dream that I was with Mark Carney, and we were in a room in Langevin, and I
Right
had
away, it's a fantasy.
yeah, right, and I I had misplaced something of his. I can't quite, like, I don't know if it was a briefing book or something. I had misplaced something, and he was fucking steamed at me, and I was running around. So it became an anxiety dream. He was just actually a thing, and I was running around. I was trying to find it, and it was like I was a 13-year-old aide, and I was in deep trouble. And anyway, it's very stressful. And I woke up, and it took like quite a few steps into the morning before I realized that Mark Carney wasn't in the room and wasn't angry with me. So
Well, I think the thing you'd forgotten was the statement where he dumped that candidate yesterday morning.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was
Okay,
the statement
Scott,
he needed it, and you had lost it somewhere.
Yeah, nobody's mad at
I-
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
well, that's
We need to
strictly true.
record even earlier in the morning so that your blessing or curse can get out to the Liberal campaign HQ before they actually write the speech for the morning.
That's right.
There we go.
Hey, we're also lucky enough today to be joined by Mickey Jurich from Politico. Hi, Mickey. How are you?
Good. You flatter. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great. Ottawa Playbook every morning at 6:00. Scott Reid reads it every morning
I
before
do.
we come on the show, so he knows what to say. Right?
That's completely correct.
Yeah. So what's in the playbook today?
Well, Nick went door knocking with the Liberal candidate in Milton. He also catches up with Anita Anand, who obviously is seeking re-election, changing her mind. And then we also take a look at the staff running the Liberal campaign.
Oh, yeah? And what did you learn about that?
Lots of national directors. It took co-directors. It took a little while to get that list from the Liberals, but at least they gave it to us. The NDP also released a list to us. The Conservatives have not. So if people want to dive into who's running the Liberal campaign, read Playbook. There's a lot of 2015 names there as well.
So you have a lot of names there, but does it answer that question about who's running the campaign?
That's not for me to say. You tell me. You tell me.
Whoever makes name tags with the word national co-director on it sure is making a mint. There's about 11 of those people.
So where are the leaders today? What are they doing? The calm before the storm is what today is.
Yes, some leaders are not too far from Ottawa, I guess, so to speak, in terms of the geography of Canada, I guess, just in case they need to hop on a quick flight to deal with tariffs. But Mark Carney, so he's in the prairies for the first time in this campaign. He's spending his day in Winnipeg. He's starting off with a morning announcement, and then he'll take questions from the media. This is kind of his normal routine on the campaign. Then later on, he'll have lunch with the Filipino community. And then,
Alberta doesn't really count Winnipeg, right?
What?
In fact, my understanding
Alberta doesn't really include Winnipeg in the whole Western Prairie thing.
I think their announcement is that they're giving Winnipeg to the United States. Actually, I think it's a preemptory move. You've got it. It's yours now, and we would like relief on a broad range of tariffs. Thank you.
I feel like they would regret that swap almost instantly.
Well, if that is
too many people diss Winnipeg. I love Winnipeg. It's a great city.
Winnipeg's an awesome city.
Winnipeg is great. I wasn't dissing it. I was saying it's kind of that Albertans look on it suspiciously, like kind of a liberal Eastern place. It's not really.
Yeah, it's sort of too close to Ontario. It gets a little bit of stink on it.
I was just April's fooling.
Best spa in Canada, 10 Spa in the Fort Garry.
Of course.
Well, and you
also,
would know.
the best sign welcoming people to the North End. Welcome to the North End, people before profits. Winnipeg, gotta love it.
Also, the coldest place I have ever watched a Grey Cup game.
That can't be true.
Oh,
Wasn't
yeah.
Regina that night colder?
No, 1990 in Winnipeg. It was 91 maybe. The year that Rocket Ishmael got that can of beer thrown at his head as he ran for a touchdown. Mickey.
Well, I'm sure
Mark Carney is in Winnipeg.
I'm sure all of this will come up because Carney will be meeting with Premier Wab Canoe later today as well. And then he'll end with a rally in Winnipeg. And then over to the Conservatives leader, Pierre Poilievre. He's continuing his tour of Atlantic Canada. He'll make a morning announcement in St. John's, Newfoundland. And then we'll speak to media later today. He'll be the first leader to visit Prince Edward Island during this campaign. Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman was she actually visited the island on the first day of the campaign, promising to get rid of tolls on the Confederation Bridge. So in PEI, Poilievre is also expected to visit a local pub. We'll see what he orders. In the evening, he'll hold an evening rally in Border Carleton, PEI. It's at a former McCain Foods plant. And then NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, he still can't.
So how long is he in PEI? Because there's only 4 ridings and they're down 40 points.
Yeah.
So
he should be back tomorrow. I think he's leaving the Atlantic tomorrow.
All right. He's there all day.
He's there, most of the day. And then we'll see where he heads later this week. I know he's in Oshawa on Thursday for a rally, and I'll be there. So people can continue reading Playbook for that later this week. And then NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, he's campaigning in Edmonton, and he'll make an announcement this morning, and then we'll just visit with local residents.
Edmonton, slightly sweater weather, I would say.
No question.
I know you're going to get into the polling numbers, but I was pretty jarred looking at some of the regionals that the Conservatives, or rather the Liberals are looking in Atlantic Canada like the Conservatives are looking in like Alberta. That
did not take long to snap back.
There's like a 28-point gap. It's insane how much they're ahead.
Yeah, he's visiting. Singh is visiting McPherson's riding today, isn't he? Is that what I read somewhere?
Yes, he is.
Yeah,
and she may be like, if this carnage continues, to borrow a Donald Trumpism, then she may be one of the last few standing. Like, that's got to be one of your toughest seats to pry out.
Yeah, Strathcona is definitely a stronghold there. I think Heather will be fine.
All right. Hey, Mickey, thank you very much. Look forward to Politico Playbook, Ottawa Playbook tomorrow morning. Again, everybody, when you're done watching this show, go right to the Ottawa Playbook and check out Mickey and NTV's good work on reporting on the election. So thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, team, we've got our daily polling from Polera. Polera's polling is brought to you by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable natural gas to heat your homes and power our economy. And we have just a tad of movement today. The decided vote is Liberal 44, Conservative 34, NDP 11, Bloc 6, Green 3, PPC 2. Conservatives are down a point for the second straight day. They're now at 34. And I was saying in the pre-banter, Kory, before you arrived, that we've been talking all this campaign about how their problem isn't their vote, but the NDP's vote. But at 34, their vote's starting to become a problem, too. The NDP are up a point for the second straight day, so they're at 11. And according to Polera, they're showing some life in British Columbia. The Bloc is showing a bit of life in Quebec. The Liberal lead is down in Quebec a little bit, but the Liberal lead in Ontario is up to 14 points, according to Polera, from 10 points just 4 days ago.
Well, that's, I don't know. Things are tracking towards Nick Cavalis's numbers that we had mid last week.
Yeah.
When you're running 2 or 3 points ahead of Bonnie Crombie in the province of Ontario, it ain't fucking good. I'll tell you that.
Right.
Kory never loses an opportunity when making a point about federal politics. Just swat a hockey stick right across Bonnie Crombie's helmet. Just in passing.
I'm not mad about it.
Bonnie Crombie sent me a happy birthday message yesterday. I got a note early in the morning. Says, Scott, I hope you have a wonderful birthday. and which was surprising and lovely because my birthday is the 30th of April.
I was just going to say, what kind of an asshole am I?
Yeah, it was. But anyway, things are getting better. Don't you guys think? I wanted to ask you, like, because this pod really is. We draw back the curtain on the science of politics here,
Right?
And do you think, David, that part of the explanation for this, and it's not a massive set of movements, but some of it is that we're now getting a reading of the numbers that strictly contain the post-Trump call, the post-Trump tariff and call, and like that has a little bit of a depressing effect on the conservatives because they get a little sidelined. They're talking about fentanyl, sounding like Ted Cruz trying to get to Mar-a-Lago's table rather than sounding like a leader in Canada.
Yeah, well, it's quite possible. I mean, the Polera tracking still has a day before the phone call in it.
So it could be even worse.
But it's got 3 days after the phone call in it. So our sponsor, CN, would like to say a thing or two about the thing we're all talking about all the time and offer a few suggestions on how to get through it. The hard punches keep landing. Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, tariffs on Canadian steel. Last week, tariffs on all Canadian content in cars and trucks. More is coming. We haven't seen this sort of trade chaos since 1890, when President McKinley slammed Canada with 50% tariffs for exactly the same reasons cited by the current administration: to raise tax revenue, to shelter American manufacturing, and to pressure Canada into joining the United States. It didn't work out very well for Mr. McKinley. More on that in a moment. Anyway, we're all angry, but anger isn't a strategy. Resolute, sober, well-thought-out policy is. Take our famous interprovincial trade barriers. It appears they're finally falling. Good. Internal protectionism makes little sense at the best of times, let alone at this moment. CN would also suggest Ottawa pursue a new industrial and labor strategy. Last year, more than 60 work stoppages choked up Canadian supply chains, from the railways to the ports to the grain terminals. This is self-harm, period. The government should also urgently examine the galaxy of regulatory, tax, and revenue constraints imposed in recent years. Do they make Canada more productive? They do not. In fact, they make our railroaders about 30% less productive than their American counterparts. That's a vulnerability. We cannot afford to be vulnerable. CN takes great pride in moving cargo safely, smoothly, and on time. But like other Canadian companies, it does so despite obstacles that shouldn't be there. We are under attack. To minimize job loss and avoid a recession, we need full cooperation. But back to the McKinley tariff. What it did was stiffen Canadian spines and raised prices for American consumers. It achieved exactly the opposite of its goals, and voters had the final word. Just saying. Elbows up. What a lovely phrase that is. I just want to say something, because a lot of the conservatives who listen or watch this pod on YouTube are getting really angry about the conversation here, and they think we're all biased in our analysis and everything. I just want to say to all of you people, you have to deal with the reality of the situation. If Ontario is 48-34, which is what a number of polls are showing roughly, that it's that kind of 14 or 15 point spread for the Liberals. The Conservatives cannot win the election. It does not matter how many people they're drawing to a rally anywhere in what's going on. It doesn't matter how shitty the Liberal campaign might look. It doesn't matter how good the Conservative campaign looks. 15 point spread in Ontario makes it impossible for anything but a Liberal government to result from that. So that is just a reality, and that's the reality we're trying to grapple with and confront on the show.
For 2 years, conservatives would send me lovely notes, and they would say, well, he's the kind of Liberal I like. Because we were trying to be candid in our criticism of what was going on around Trudeau. Same thing now, man. I mean, we're just truth tellers, so hang me. Like, call me Galileo. I'm sorry, folks. I'm just trying to tell you the sun resides at the center of our system here, and that's just the way it is.
I think you mean Copernicus, but
well, anyway, whatever. Stop it.
Or maybe Cassandra.
You know, it's like when I called you
Hey, Scott,
Trotsky.
give us a little insight. Give us a little inside scoop. Why did the Liberals waste that day on Paul Chang yesterday?
You know, I really don't. I don't understand it. I haven't asked anyone, so I don't know if you've had this conversation, David, and you know the answer to your own question, but I don't know what the honest answer is. I will only make this observation. Sometimes, in my experience, these challenges come up for almost every party in almost every election. Okay, somebody said something awful. It turns out somebody has some bullshit on their resume or their history or socials or whatever have you. And you have to make a relative judgment about its acceptability or unacceptability. So it's unacceptable, but I'm going to stick with the candidate. It's unacceptable. I'm just going to sever this limb. We know Kory's view on this. Kory's been consistent, right? At the first hint of trouble, I shotgun the guy. We take him up behind the barn and we put him down like old Yeller. Okay. I think sometimes leaders feel like they get themselves talked on the campaign plane into a space of, you know what it takes strength to show? You know what it takes? You know what the definition of a strong leader is? A strong leader is someone that won't just be jerked around by the media and told they have to dump a candidate. If I have to sit there and take it in the teeth for 24 to 36 hours, well, this will pass. And I'm going to show people that I will stand. And I don't know if that was a dynamic, but I've seen it happen before with leaders. And then, of course, overnight, you know, you get the first hint of RCMP and poof, that guy's gone like a fucking ghost at daylight.
Yeah, I know. I don't really understand why people think you can or think you should try to tough your way through these kinds of things. I mean, and I think that in politics, anytime you're looking at the camera and saying something to people that is indefensible, that they don't think you even believe, that is politics, you're breaching your relationship with that person. They're never going to quite think of things you say the same way. Again, you're quite capable of looking them in the eye and saying bullshit.
Well, and I would add, like, you have to ask, is this person worth blowing, in this case, 2 days of your campaign? Is it worth having your announcement? For example, yesterday, I think the Liberals had a good announcement, but this issue ate the day. And when it eats a day, it's not just eating a positive announcement. It's eating, like, everything you've spent on Leaders Tour that day. It's eating just the entirety of what you're trying to push out, your message. And there was nothing in this candidate that suggested to me that the juice was worth the squeeze in terms of keeping it. And I think sometimes on these issues, there is a bit of a judgment call involved. Like, are we talking about somebody's, you know, social media post from 15 years ago on something that's like a marginal judgment call? This was not one of those cases. This was recent. This was very clearly something that goes to an issue that has been a strength for the Liberals, which was their ability to talk credibly about foreign interference, at least in recent weeks. And it undermined that. And it's something that was also like, you can't really just take that back with an apology. Like, this guy threatened to turn somebody over to a hostile foreign government. Like, that is insane. That is not a lapse of judgment. And so I think, for me, what was fascinating about this was that they allowed it to go on for so long, for seemingly no real payback. And, you know, I know there's been speculation about, you know, perhaps courting some mainland Chinese diaspora population with that. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
There will have been people saying that to a rookie leader, saying, "Boss, you don't understand. Okay, we got to think about Markham. We got to think about the Chinese vote on the ground. We got to think about Mandarin speak."
But they're losing,
like,
they're losing the forest
that,
for the trees and that stuff.
What's
like,
the
no, it's crazy.
What's the size of the Chinese diaspora in like Markham? Like, it's like 70,000 people. Like, you can find another fucking person who speaks Mandarin who doesn't have the baggage of saying something like that. Like, there's no shortage of people within that ethnicity that probably live in Markham who would be an excellent candidate that haven't done shit like that. But I know I disagree with you, Jordan. I don't think that Liberals have a good record on Chinese foreign interference. I think they have the worst fucking record on that issue.
In the last few weeks.
And, okay. You know, like, you know, I also saw that Han Dong isn't running again. Hooray. You know, maybe he'll get you know, a pension check from the Chinese embassy. Who knows? But like, it's clearly carrying water for a totalitarian government that has, made threats to Michael Chong's family members in China, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's gross. It's gross. Like, we have to throw one of these jokers out of the Ontario PC party, and it's the best fucking thing we ever did. And we've had to not let a couple of other people run who were clearly compromised. This is the reality of Canadian politics. You're going to have a close eye on some of the people with ties to India and some people who have ties to China, and not all of the dozens of multicultural communities in Canada have a foreign interference problem. There are a couple, and it's pretty evident when somebody does, and you go through their background and things they've said, and if they're carrying water for a totalitarian regime, that's a big red flag. It's like a big red flag. And why would you invite that into your campaign or into your caucus? It's crazy to me.
But I want to say one other thing about this, because I think that even though he's now gone, which apparently the bar was RCMP investigation.
Since when, right? Since fucking when is that?
Oh no,
the bar?
but I mean for the Carney campaign, that was the bar.
Well,
but it shouldn't have been.
Bar.
Well, I assumed when I did my Hey You yesterday, I assumed they were going to gun him.
Yeah.
And the fact they didn't, I mean, that's just for the Liberal campaign team. Their Sunday is a massive fail. Like they needed to deal with this on Sunday.
Well, he's got to be friends with somebody. I think there's got to be a personal relationship there or something, because it makes no sense on the face of it, absent that. And look, that was one of the issues that we've seen in some of these cases before. Somebody's got a relationship with somebody who's at the center of things, and somehow they get to have the normal rules of the jungle not apply to them.
Yeah, but I think something that happened yesterday is actually going to have a lasting impact even after this candidate is gone. And that was Carney's terrible response when he was pressed on this yesterday. You talk about the idea that something like this is a violation of trust with voters. His response yesterday, it was stiff, it was haughty, and it did not in any way reflect the seriousness of what was in front of him as an issue. And I think that the damage of that type of interaction, of those types of clips, will continue long after this candidate is gone. So there was a problem in the campaign decision-making about deciding to keep this candidate for so long. And there was also a problem with how Carney either himself chose to answer those questions or was coached to answer those questions. This is not a teachable moment. This goes to his judgment.
I hate that fucking phrase, by the way.
It's terrible.
Yes, that's where I wanted to go. I wanted, I know we're lingering on this a lot, but the thing that I disliked most about it, other than the essence of the decision and the defense, because let's face it, if your defense includes Chinese secret police, you don't need James Carville to tell you that you're in the wrong neck of the political woods, right? Anyway, a teachable moment, I think, is just such the reason I dislike it so much isn't just that I dislike the phrase. It's that everything about Carney since he became leader has been the un-Trudeau, and that smelled like Trudeau, that phrase. And I think that was you just don't want you don't want to skate near that ice.
Well, if we want to talk more generically about candidates and getting rid of candidates, this is the problem with snap elections. This is the problem with appointing a bunch of candidates mid-campaign.
He's an incumbent member.
But we're going to see more of this though. In terms of when you see a lot of candidate problems like this, where you have to ice people, it's mid-campaign. Right, appointments, and we're going to see a bunch from a number of parties, and I'm sure there are lots of people in the oppo world who are digging through this kind of shit. But any candidate you get rid of before the deadline for appointing additional candidates should be an easy choice. I would understand if we were past the deadline of changing,
and you're giving away a riding.
You're giving away a riding.
They still have a week.
That's a different thing.
Sure.
But anything before that is, see you. Look, I remember not making some MPPs happy one day, saying look, I could replace most of you with a broomstick, and I got a whole closet full of brooms. Because at the end of the day, they just like that. I don't
Did
know.
that violate one of Paul Wells' eternal laws of politics or rules of politics? Or
I think Doug got me another copy of Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People to thumb through before bed. But look, but that is the honest truth in most writings. Like the name on the ballot doesn't add much, maybe
urban areas, in urban areas.
maybe 2 or 3 points. Like, look, there are exceptions to that, but they are exceptions. They're not the rule. And, there's nothing super special about this guy. And therefore, open the closet, find another broom.
But there is a little set of interesting tactical decisions behind this, because given that this guy was a surefire had to go, like when the Conservatives knew they had a guy that was going to have to go, they probably would have preferred to hold that till after the candidate deadline, so that the Liberals couldn't replace him and would actually lose a seat.
Mm-hmm.
But they probably felt the need to blunt Liberal momentum and brought it out early, and God bless them, it worked.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
One thing, yes, for sure. So they got the head on a pike. The one thing I was surprised by yesterday, because I watched Carney's news conference live, and I thought to myself, oh shit, this day could be lost, because we could have Chang be the news in English Canada and Bill C-69, which I'm sorry, he looked uncomfortable again on it. He was struggling in both French and English to weave that answer, which is unacceptable, because he should have been briefed by it. He kind of fanned on the puck on the weekend, to be honest. So he should have had that thing absolutely buttered by yesterday. But the one thing that surprised me was the housing stuff still punched through. Like it did act like I thought we'd see hardly any word, but it still sort of led the campaign trail news when people would do the roundup. So I think the Liberals, they didn't get away with it, but it was maybe less damaging than I expected at 9:30.
Well, for the 75,000 people who watched the National with me last night, they would have seen Chang lead the story, lead the news in a whole item of his own, and then they would have seen, and no resignation at that point, so it's an unresolved issue.
Yeah.
And then they would have seen a segment on party policy promises, in which Carney's and Poilievre's and Singh's were all wrapped up together.
Yeah.
But that's
right.
But nobody is watching the news.
And it wasn't the Liberal promise like worth $250 billion or something. Like, wasn't it a big ticket item?
Yeah.
Come on, David, investments.
But to be fair, over the course of the day, as the news was reported, it actually led. So, I mean, if you're like, nobody sits and waits for the National now.
Yeah. But like, it goes to judgment. Like, I think
I do, because I think it's a responsible part of preparation for this show.
Well, that's
you're very responsible, David. But yeah,
you take this job seriously.
It goes
to
Carney's judgment in a way that, like, he's still new. Voters don't necessarily have many negative impressions of his judgment, but this is where that can be created.
Do you think it's because he's sneaky?
Oh, I wouldn't go so far.
Sneaky carbon tax Carby?
Maybe.
Hey, listen, let's do 5 minutes on this.
Okay.
If tomorrow's Tariff Day, tomorrow's Liberation Day. And so if the Conservatives are going to take Kory's advice, tomorrow is the day they start taking it. Tomorrow is the day that they don't have a fentanyl crime announcement, but they talk about tariffs and Trump, and they talk about it in a way that repositions them in the mainstream of Canadian thought on this issue. Kory, how did they do that?
Well, I think by focusing on it and talking about it.
Yeah.
It's such a tough thing to answer in terms of this question, because like God knows what Trump is going to do tomorrow, and like as we talked about yesterday, like there is a very broad spectrum of possibilities that people are looking at right now, and this is people that are talking to the U.S. administration every day as to what's coming. Like, we may get some indication this evening as to what it's going to be, or maybe a slight narrowing of what the options are. But here's the frightening thing about Trump and that administration is people who are sitting around that cabinet table have no fucking clue what he's going to do from one day to the next. and it could be, something like the options could be right together, or they could be on opposite poles of the earth, and you just don't know. So we'll see what happens. If I were to hazard a guess, the worst option is they do something that causes more disruption than they anticipate, and then they have to, roll it back somewhat, which we've seen them do on past occasions. But if that happens, it's not just going to be tomorrow that's tariffs. It's going to be tomorrow through next Wednesday, all tariffs. And if that's the case, I think, they can try to pivot all they want. I think the conservatives are in deep, deep shit. But if it's something that's less, and they dial the temperature back, and this fades a little bit from the headlines, then I think the conservatives have a lot bigger opening in terms of ability to continue to run the campaign they seem intent on running.
Jordan, if you were running a conservative campaign tomorrow, what would be the most visible and obvious difference between what you'd said or done before that you would do tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would center Trump as the opponent in Poilievre's remarks. Like, you would have to be square against him and be stronger in your language. Like, I think moving beyond the knock it off, particularly if we're seeing a larger tariff package than some had hoped. You have to calibrate it to the moment, and you have to, I think there would be virtue in, at least for a day, making it seem like that's your priority.
Right.
I think making that reorientation in order to cross a bar for voters who are worried about this is important.
So not, gaslighting people on fentanyl, using Trump language.
Scott, how would you try to make an impact on the, hey, we're as concerned about Trump as anybody else?
First of all, I wouldn't talk about the lost liberal decade and how it's the lost liberal decade that's left us in such a weak position to deal with Trump. I don't want 10% of a criticism of Carney and the liberals and a partisan domestic attack to interfere with a full-throated focus on Trump and how the nation needs to rally around that challenge. The second thing is I would pull a stunt. I would have Jamil Jivani call Vance. I would then bring him up on stage with me, and I would say, Jamil Jivani is close to Vance. He has placed a call with him. He has given him our unequivocal objection to this. And understand, we are going to use our network in the United States. We are going to use every network available to us in Canada. We will try to reverse this. We will work to reverse this. And I think Tawna McCharles in the Star has an interesting, so I would employ that. That is an asset they have that they haven't used. Now, I know that Shivani can go off like a grenade, but I think that would be a surprise, and I think it would be in their interest. Tawna McCharles is an interesting piece in today's Star. I just want to mention real quickly where she says, if you look closely, there's a divergence of opinion between the Liberal campaign and the Conservative campaign as to how to handle this trade issue, not as a matter of campaign politics, but as a matter of literally go forward economic strategy. That fundamentally the Conservative message is, look, let's manage our way, negotiate with these guys, and get things back to normal as fast as possible. Whereas Carney's message is, we can never once again be sure that we have a reliable partner in the United States because their politics are too unpredictable. Trump is obviously too unpredictable. Now the guy's talking about running for a third term. Christ only knows. And so we have to fortify ourselves by creating a whole other series of mechanisms and relationships that can't replace the United States, but could insulate us a little bit. And that divergence of opinion, I think, is very difficult for the Conservatives, because I'm not sure that people are in a mood to believe that things can just go back to normal if Trump has two nice phone calls in a row. I just don't think people think a dog can bite at any moment.
We had a trade agreement with Donald Trump. This isn't some trade agreement that was inherited from a previous president. This isn't the original NAFTA deal. This isn't any of that. This is his deal. And I think he called it the most beautiful trade agreement that was ever written or ever signed or whatever the fuck it
best in the history of the world.
In the history of the world. That sounds very like what Trump would say. But if there's my word is my bond, I don't know what the exact opposite of that statement is. Like, my word is worth nothing. My word is like, a piece of used toilet paper. I don't know. Like, that's what Trump is.
Yeah.
That's what
And
Trump
we're
is.
3 months into his 4-year term,
Oh
assuming
my,
he,
and I'm
like,
exhausted, Jordan. Don't bring that
right?
up. I'm just
So
exhausted.
the
I don't know how
idea
he
that there's
keeps up
going
the
to
pace.
continue to be this chaos, this instability, and this, like, frankly, shanking of Canada at every opportunity, I think is a pretty solid bet.
Well, he hasn't been able to, maintain a consistent position on any of these things for like more than a day or two, right? Often less. Like, it'll change between morning and night. So, I think Canadians are onto him in terms of that. You see some of this with with Smith as well. This belief that somehow you can mollify this guy by having a nice conversation. I just don't think that's true, and I think he will very quickly prove the lie to anyone who thinks that is the case, because it's just so inconsistent with what we've seen on every issue with him. It's not, he wakes up in a bad mood. It can change midday. Like,
Mid conversation.
yeah.
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 All right, kids. Blessing or curse? Let's wrap this up so that folks can get on with their day. Kory, do you have a blessing or a curse?
Well, I have a blessing to the Conservative campaign, that I think that they're going to be not out of position in terms of where they're going to be responding from tomorrow. If they're in Ottawa, I think that's a really smart choice. I was surprised to hear your Vance suggestion, Scott. I'm going to have to think about whether I agree with that or not. But I think being in Ottawa is the right place to be. I think they really did themselves no favors being out on the West Coast last time, and out of the news cycle. I think you want to be right in the news cycle. I think you want to be right where as many national journalists are when you're responding to something this big. And so I think it's an indication. I think they're learning from their mistakes.
All right, Scott.
Look, this campaign is going really well for Carney and the Liberals. There's no question about it. We spent time talking about it, but I do want to go back to the things that we didn't like in this podcast, and something you said on the weekend, David, or last week, I guess, the end of last week, and that was campaign prep. So my curse is to the Liberal campaign. You pointed out last week the candidate prep needs to seem to change because he gets into Q&A, and a guy who ought to be extraordinarily capable in Q&A seems to be having trouble. I'm really, really hung up on the way he handled Bill C-69 yesterday. He seemed to be struggling, not just for French words. He seemed to be struggling for the logic, the essence of the argument he was making.
You know who's the worst Quebec advisors, Scott?
Who's that?
The worst possible people are Quebec Anglophones.
Right.
These are the worst people to listen to on Quebec in any campaign. You are better off listening to people from Young, Saskatchewan, or Prelate, Saskatchewan about Quebec, because at least we don't have any fucking biases. We'll just read data, right? But Quebec Anglophones bring all of their history and chips and every fucking thing, and they'll delete. Oh my Christ! And he's got too many of them.
I don't disagree. I don't know if that's what's going on, but I know this. You have to work backwards from the product and the result. And the product and the result yesterday wasn't what it should have been on Chang. The product and the result on Bill C-69 wasn't what it should have been yesterday. So whatever that is, you got to smooth that carpet out. You got to get those wrinkles flat.
There is no argument for keeping C-69. There just is no argument for it. They basically gutted the thing in their agreement.
No,
with
I think you guys are talking about different bills.
You guys are talking. You mean Bill 96, Scott?
Bill 96.
Scott is talking about the language bill.
I'm talking about the
not
language.
the No More Pipelines bill.
I'm mixing it up with pipelines bill. No, I mean Bill 96 in Quebec.
It's okay. His answer
what
was
riding
so
is Bill 96 running
incomprehensible.
again? And are they running against Peter MacKay?
Yeah, his answer was so incomprehensible yesterday. I understand
Galileo.
the confusion.
I gotta quit. But anyway, yes, Bill 96, and sorry, as I'm scolding them for a lack of prep, I'm mislabeling the bill. But the convoluted answer was a challenge.
Yeah, your point stands.
There you go. We stand by him. He's a man of integrity. We stand by Scott. He's going nowhere. He's served his communities well for years.
I should mention him under police investigation.
It's okay.
Jordan,
it was a teachable moment. It was a teachable moment. Yeah. So I did a blessing going out to the NDP campaign. I think they had a good swing out to BC. Seems the polls bear that out. I thought the meeting with EB yesterday was really good. So Singh's now, he's met with Canoe, he's met with EB. This is what you want to do. Let's surf off some of that strength. There is going to be a need over the next few days for the NDP to carve out a space in response to the tariffs. So I think the blessing that I have going out to the campaign is, please think about the visuals. Think about where you're going to be over the next few days. Workers, workers, workers. The space that you are going to carve out here is that any response to these tariffs must put working people front and center, and that only the NDP is going to be there to defend that in the response. So please make sure the tour visuals align with that message. And then I think that there's a clear space for the NDP in that conversation.
Jordan, Singh's already come out and said he would never support Poilievre government.
Yeah.
At a future pod, because we're out of time today, at a future pod, we should talk about when it is that he should acknowledge he's not going to be the prime minister and articulate that the banker needs a social conscience.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that on a future pod.
Yeah.
I have
And
thoughts.
what color sweater is coupled with that day? Because that's going to be a delicate choice.
My blessing goes out to Scott's and my old late friend, John Duffy. I've been thinking about John a lot because he was such a student of campaigns and such an historian of campaigns. He wrote one of the best books ever about Canadian politics called Fights of Our Lives. This election would be an additional chapter in that book because it's such an historic and such a strange election, the way it's going down. So, I mean, with everything that's going on, the machinations around Trump and the campaign and the way it all links, I've been thinking about our friend John a lot and wishing that he was around to talk about this campaign with, for sure. He'd be on the Herle Burley. So, anyway, John, miss you, thinking about you. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you to our sponsor, CN, and our polling sponsor, Enbridge. To you three for being here, for Mickey for showing up so bright and early in the morning from Politico, and to all of you who watch or listen to the show, thanks very much, and we'll be back tomorrow with more of this, whatever it is. Is it anything? We don't know.